Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Maltz again here at allpointsTV.com and also WFOV, the great radio station over on University Drive. And we're very glad to have both audiences with us this afternoon. We will be airing again on Saturday at 12 o'clock noon. And they will re-air the program on that station on Saturday. We're very glad to be partnering with a radio station of that caliber, and we are very happy to be bringing programs along with WFOV. We are allpointsTV.com here at this studio. Want you to stay tuned for the next hour, and we're going to talk about a few things. I want to start off though talking about John McCain. You know, it's amazing how we make the politicians great, and we call them public servants, and yet the public servants are those who are the producers. John, they're the producers of various things, and by them producing goods that the society needs, they are in fact making a contribution. And I don't know where we get this idea that the people that are the public servants are the ones that don't produce anything, and that is really amazing that we have fallen for this noise. Really, this noise that the people that don't produce anything are the ones who are public servants. I'd like to know how that works. You don't produce anything, but you're a public servant by having something to do with extracting wealth from the producers, those who go to work every day, and they are in fact contributing to the government treasury. And we have them, the taxpayers. The taxpayers are not the public servants. They're the ones who are being hit upon by the public servants, who are taking advantage of the largesse on the part of the politicians. You know, we have these politicians who are able to define realities they were doing this past weekend, and of course I'm sad to hear about the death of John McCain, but we have to be honest here, and this idea that John McCain was a maverick, and he would sometimes buck his party because he was sometimes standing in the gap and wasn't always going along with his party. I would say that would be true for he certainly wasn't going along with his party a lot of times. We didn't call him a maverick, we called him a rhino. But John is amazing. They call him a maverick because he would buck his own party.
I saw that Maverick label and I went, where's John McCain ever been a maverick? I mean, he didn't go off in his own way. He followed the Democrats. I mean, I'm a person who doesn't like the Republican Party in Michigan. I don't like the fact that Schuette starts screwing with the medical marijuana law. I think he wants to hand it over to billionaire corporations to make more money off it for himself and his party members. I don't like that because 65% of the people voted for medical marijuana in the matter of which we have the law currently stated. And I hate him for that. And I had a person from the Michigan GOP call me last week. I said, I will not back you. I will not give any money. I won't even give you my opinion because Schuette I don't want. I don't want Schuette. So I guess I'm a maverick because I'm all over the place. I'm a libertarian. I tick off everybody because I mean, you know, a libertarian's going to tick off for conservatives because you speak out against this or that. You're a liberal, and then if you speak out on the Democrats say, well, you're a conservative. You know, so I mean. Either way, some things just make sense and other people don't. And that's why I look at things. So, I mean, he was never a maverick in that respect. He never was. He just wanted to be liked. And he wanted to be liked by the Democrats. And he made his bed, now lying on it. I mean, I'm sorry he died. I'm sorry. I mean, the loss of life, especially to cancer. I like to see him 95 and died of old age. Cancer is a horrible thing. Having said that, though, I don't see where he is this great and still a leader. And I am puzzled by why the people of Arizona kept on electing him. That's why I'm puzzled by that.
3 terms as a member of the House, and then was elected 6 terms in the Senate. And these guys just don't get it. We don't need anybody up there acting as career politicians. We need to have them go up there and do some public service, if you can call it that. Go up there and do what they can to straighten out some of the problems that were there when they arrived. And then you go back home and you join the private sector and you make a contribution to the private sector based upon your knowledge of how the government operates. But they go up there and they stay. John McCain was in Washington for more than 30 years. And I don't know how you can claim that that's public service. Public service is the producers that produce a product that society needs or it desires, and you have this production that goes on, and they do a public service by producing something that allows the consumer to spend his or her time doing something different. By them producing a product, it allows for the consumer to spend his time, his or her time, making some other products or creating some other kinds of creating wealth. But this idea that you are, we have this idea that the producers are not the ones who are making the contributions to politicians.
Look at Barack Obama. He basically said the government, all successful stories, basically is not owed to the people who actually did the effort. I mean, everybody does have a hand. When you start a business, you got to look at contractors, because let's face it, you're not going to be expert in all fields. So you can't get a contractor to look at the building you're looking at to make sure it's stable, or you change it so you could use it. So yeah, but you pay them. But overall, the person who orchestrates it from beginning to end, all the aspects, and brings all the people and the talent in there, they are responsible. They're the ones who created it. They said the vision, the ideas, and stuff like that. He thinks he and his political likes think they're so visionary because they got the point of a gun to aim at you in the form of all these law enforcement groups. They're willing to crush you if you don't go along with their visions. So a person who does it voluntarily, hey, I'll lure you into my business, my restaurant, my store, because I got good ideas, good products. Those people are far more heroic than a damn politician is, in my opinion.
John, they have done a good job of clouding the atmosphere so that the robber barons, and aren't they robbing when they take the taxes out of the taxpayers' pockets and put it in the federal coffers or the state coffers? Aren't they robber barons in terms of taking the wealth that has been produced and taking it and putting it in the federal treasury, and then they use it for their own political ends?
Yeah, they say, look, I'm giving you this. I'm not going to talk about the 3 million people I forced to pay for it. I'm giving you this. I'm giving this to thank me, keep me in office. I mean, and then then they make 190-some thousand as a senator. They retired, I think Pelosi's $100-some million net worth. I'd like to find her financial advisors and her investment team. I would love that, because I love to have that kind of turnaround. I really, I don't see where they're servants. They're not doing anything but serving themselves.
They've sold this idea that they're servants, but they're not serving the public. They are a parasitic presence on the public, and I've seen this. When I was in Africa a couple of weeks ago, I saw this parasitic influence in Gambia, and this idea that the government is serving the public. I don't even know how we can stretch what the government does and say that it's a public service what they're doing. They won't even do the job that they basically responsible for. For example, government was set up among men. You can go and read the Declaration of Independence, and you can see that government is set up among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that to secure the rights, these natural rights, these inalienable rights you're born with, the blessings of liberty that a person has just because the person is born, and the people in the government, all what they're supposed to do is secure the rights that the people have, not to in fact give them rights, and for them to claim that there's a Bill of Rights there's a Bill of Rights. In other words, our rights come from government. That is really amazing that they can use that lever to get into the vestiges of power and make the claim that our rights come from the government, or to say it a different way, our rights come from the politicians. Try that one on for size. The politicians are the ones that give us our rights, and if that would be the case, then we really have a problem. Because if government gives us our rights, then when you get an Attila, and that's what most of them are, Attila, then if you get a person in there that wants to go in there and gets in, and he's another Attila the Hun, and all of the politicians, quite frankly, Attila the Hun, to a lesser or great extent, some more clever in disguising who they are and what they stand for than others. So when you look at what Ayn Rand calls Attila and see what they're actually doing, it is amazing for them to have been able to convince the American people that they are benevolent influences and that they are, in fact, doing things that will, in fact, bring about the greater good for the greatest number, because they have the goodwill of the society at heart. Not interested in power. They don't care about being reelected. All they want is to do the greatest good for the greatest number, and that's what they're focused on. And if you see any evidence of that, you need to do, as that Jerry Butler said, send a telegram, send a telegram, send me a telegram. Although I know telegrams aren't we don't communicate. That's snail pace now. But we don't have a government that is doing the greatest good for the greatest man, and that's just a myth that they created. And they use people like John McCain. When John McCain died, I kept watching this over the weekend as they were trying to find something to say that would match all the time they were putting on John McCain. He was this great person, and he did all of these great things. And he was a maverick, and he was very much about the business of sometimes departing from his party, because sometimes he disagreed with them based upon principle. Not that he's a rhino, but he disagreed with them based on principle, and sometimes he took an opposite view of what his party stood for. For example, with Obamacare. And they had one vote short of repeal and replacing Obamacare, which is, I think most of us would agree, is a disaster for the country. We don't need to have the government that is taking over the health care in this country. But that's what John McCain did. He wasn't being a maverick. He was being a Democrat.
You know, I just happen to think, I don't know if you ever saw the '80s movie Top Gun. And it was about the pilots and the Navy. Maybe that's where they're trying to say he's Maverick, because that was the nickname of Tom Cruise's character. Maybe you're trying to identify with Maverick, And it was about the same time when McCain would have gone into office. About the same time I think that movie's released, 86, 87. So, I mean, I just have a hard time believing he was I don't think he was an original thinker. I think he was kind of a milksap. I think he was I don't care for the guy. Okay, what's he going to do? Stand up against a bunch of very principled people and say, I'm not going to vote the same way as the rest of my party? They weren't going to kill him. So what was he doing? Anything was gutsy, really. I mean, the Democrats, you cross them, you face more potential for ire than you've crossed a bunch of Republicans.
That's a very good point. If you in fact go against the liberal grain, then you have a lot more to pay for it than you would if you in fact go against the grain of the conservatives or the libertarians. If you cut across the lines and you are taking a more conservative position, you're going to have a lot of problems, because the liberal media is going to be on your case, and they're going to crucify you in the press as they're doing Donald Trump. I think we have to look at what is going on right now and be very careful in analyzing what we're looking at. This idea that the people in Washington are, securing our rights, and they are, in fact, in Washington making sure that our rights are, in fact, maintain based upon the strictures of this country, the constitutional mandates and the Declaration of Independence, particularly the second paragraph of the Declaration, where Jefferson said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain, the people are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." It did not say those are the only rights you have. It just says that among the rights that you have are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and other rights coming from those rights. Life, liberty, and the right to pursue happiness, and then all the rights that are intended, therefore, based upon those three fundamental rights. And Jefferson was very clear about our rights come from God. They're not talking about our rights coming from government. In fact, they were very askance of government going out of control. They really wanted to maintain government underneath the constitutional limits. They put a lot of limits upon government. And you can tell that that's what they were afraid of. They were afraid of government going out of control. And that's what has happened now. Government has gone completely out of control. And we're going to have to, get back to, I don't know how we're going to do it based upon how far we've deviated from the norms of the Constitution. But we've got to get back to the founders. And that does not mean getting back to what John McCain was standing for. John McCain was not a statesman. I mean, we can see how once somebody dies, and we see how they build a person up. That John McCain was this visionary. He was this person that was out there. Thank you, I appreciate it. This person was out there going against the grain of his own party. I bet you he would not be looked at as being a maverick if he had bucked the Democratic Party. As long as you're bucking the Republican Party and you're over there siding with the liberals, which is what John McCain did to a large extent, then they want to commend him for being a maverick and being a person that was more principled and things of that sort. But what's the principle that you're standing for in terms of government taking over the health care of this country? And John McCain voted for that health care takeover to continue to be in place when it was never intended for the government to be involved in all these areas where they are intrusive and running the lives of the American people. Because once you control the health care, then you really control, once you get into the health care, you control all the other vestiges of life.
Because they could say, well, we don't like your political views, and if we found some kind of discrepancy here, so, your coverage is now revoked. And that's not beyond the pale of reality. I could see both parties doing that to anybody they don't like. Your insurance, your health insurance is in their hands. They want to silence you. They don't have to go screw with the First Amendment. They can buy stuff, all that. They could just take away your health insurance. They'll have you by their, they'll have you.
You see how they grab you by your dependency upon the government. So if you are dependent upon the government for your livelihood and for your health care, then how do you rise up against the government when you are so dependent upon the largest of government, which if the government was not in the place where it is, all the places where it is in fact intruding, then you would not be able to get a handle on the needs that you have, because the government is taking over a lot of the things that we once provided for ourselves. I don't know how that's good. The government will, in fact, we have socialism in this country, and I don't know how that turns out better when we tried it in other parts of the world, and everywhere it's been tried, we've had the same outcome. Nowhere have we had the government taking over more and more vestiges of society, and that has turned out well for the people. The people are better off when they're showing their own industrial prowess. And when they're able to affect their own outcomes based upon their own efforts, it's like, you rise and fall based upon your own merit. And if you don't succeed, you try again. But you have to put forth the effort. And I was contrasting how it works today to how it worked when I was coming up. The government did not, in fact, take the place of your effort. What they did was that they subsidized the effort by, you did this, this, and this, and then what the government would do is that it would, in fact, complement some of the shortages. If you didn't have maybe the food items, then you were able to get some assistance, but they didn't give you a check. They didn't give you a check and let you stay home. And they gave you commodities. And because it was never enough, or because it was so much salt in the food, it wasn't like they were giving you steak. I mean, it was really amazing. Pork and gravy, rice, beans, flour.
All that stuff came from powder. That came from farmers who are already being subsidized by the government.
Yeah.
Instead of selling the product to the consumer directly, the government took it and put it in their own packaging and gave it out that way. So there was already subsidization going on, which is some people. Let's face it, we like to help farmers, but thing is, sometimes that help keeps them from not employing more intelligent means for production.
Yeah,
and that's what it does. I mean, it basically makes them kind of lazy.
Yeah, it does. If you take the place of the individual effort, then you are in fact creating a certain dependency upon government. And government, Ayn Rand again was saying that we're going to collapse under altruism. That is, say government is an altruistic institution where it's going to do all these wonderful things, and it is going to take upon itself all these different ways of doing things, and whether people work or not, or whether they create a situation where they can, in fact, have a viable lifestyle, whether they do that or not, whether they put forth an effort or not, then they're going to still be subsidized and be given things, whether or not it's based on merit or not. If you want to see a society collapsing around that, you don't have to look any further than any place where it's been tried in the past and where it's being tried right now, and the outcome of it in places like Venezuela. I mean, you can go over there on the edges of capitalism, and you can pretend that giving out free stuff and handing it out at the very end of capitalism is what is driving. I mean, socialism is a driver of independence and care and government well-being and all the other. But once you do what Margaret Thatcher said, where you run out of other people's money, you see what happens. And it happens over and over again. And you would think at some point people would remember, based upon the fact that there is not one example where the outcome has been different. You will eventually run out of other people's money. But the reason why there's money there in the first place is because at the edge of the capitalist system, you have, at the edge of it, you're now turning toward a socialist state with the last breath of capitalism. So there's production, and then by capitalism for a while fueling the economy, after a while what happens is that people just stop producing because they understand that the state is confiscating the means of production. People are producing, and they're getting the state is in fact confiscating what they're producing. And at a certain point, unlike it was in the capitalist system where a person is able to retain a large part of the fruits of his or her labor, after a while, if you confiscate the wealth that's being produced, and the other person are getting it without being productive, the question comes down to why would they then produce it if the outcome is going to be the same for the producers and the non-producers? And we have had that history repeated throughout the attempts to apply socialism. and it does not work, and it will not work. It hasn't worked, and it will not work because of what Ayn Rand said in a book called The Virtue of Selfishness. People are motivated by their own self-interest. Okay, we're going to take a break at this point from WFOV, and we will see you on the other side of the break. Hope you'll come back after 4 minutes, and we are very glad to have you with us again. We'll see you in 4 minutes. Okay, we are going to continue what we're doing here at allpointstv.com. You know, you have to think about why it is that for a while in Venezuela, for example, the latest example of this failed state, where they switched from a capitalist system to a socialist system, and they thought that people would continue to produce what they produce under the capitalist system. They would just continue to produce, and they would not be incentivized to produce. They would be incentivized to produce, although the state is confiscating what is being produced by the persons who are the entrepreneurs. And if you think that people are going to operate out of the interest of someone else, outside of their own interests, then you have not been paying attention to what's going on here and why these socialist states fail one after the other. They fail because people are selfish. They're motivated by their own selfish interests. And that's what Ayn Rand is talking about when she talks about the virtue of selfishness.
But I'd like to know this. All these people advocate for surrendering your own interest. Basically, they're appealing to you because you have more than maybe your neighbor does. Maybe the neighbor hit some bad times. So you're able to provide for yourself. So you don't mind helping your neighbor out. But for a continued way of existence, let's face it, your resources and you yourself are going to be exhausted. Ayn Rand also is known for saying there's nothing wrong with being in a lifeboat. It's a necessary thing. But there's something wrong with living your life in a lifeboat. And, you know, so it's a stopgap measure. That's what I'm taking it as. And she would. So these people are saying, I'm not that I'm like, you know, preaching some gospel of Ayn Rand, but she makes a very valid point. Socialism's always going to, because of things that they can't see coming up. There's always going to be some case for, like, hurricanes, for example. The damage is done. It varies from, storm to storm. But now you have the capitalist system set in there. You pay insurance, and they can pay you money out towards the road. And that insurance, when it's not being used to be paid out, is invested in the stock markets and stuff. And that's how it grows. So then that employs people. You cut that out, where are you going to have your economic growth coming from? I'd like to know that.
And we see the answer to that question, John, by what has happened. Whenever we've tried this model over and over again, we don't seem to learn anything and don't seem to understand why we have one failure after another. One failure in 1917 with Russia, and then in 49 with China under Mao Zedong. Just continue to go down that road and look at the outcome of people trying the same thing over and over again. And if you say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome, then you have that in spades, because people are continuing to do the same thing over and over again. And it's amazing that they expect the outcome to be different. Venezuela is not a new ideal. It's the same thing we've seen repeated over time and time again. And Margaret Thatcher was right. You will eventually run out of other people's money. Why would you run out of other people's money? Because they stop producing wealth. You're not going to produce wealth when you're confiscating it. Okay, we're going to welcome back WFOV. We want to welcome you back, and we're very glad you came back to join us. We're not very far from where we were when you left. And we're just talking here about this idea they sold us, that these politicians are the ones that are the great movers and shakers of society. Which is not true. The politicians are not the movers and shakers of society. The motors of society. That's what Ayn Rand is talking about in a book called Atlas Shrugged. The movers and shakers of society are the producers.
I'd like to. Okay, from my understanding, Barack Obama is kind of. Did he have actual jobs before coming into the public the limelight? I don't know. Maybe I think one time there was a book he mentioned about working at Baskin Robbins or something like that. I don't know if that's true or not, but I remember reading something about that. But all these people who are going to politics, we look at them as if there's some experts and everything else. The best person to lead other people is people who've actually experienced many things that everybody else experiences. I don't see Barack Obama. I don't see John McCain. I don't see any of these people really experiencing that. John McCain lived an ensconced lifestyle. His parents, his father and his grandfather both been admirals in the U.S. Navy. So you're definitely, you're not average. You're not dealing with the average person when you're a military brat, being raised around different posts, different outposts in the world and stuff like that. You got a different perspective, but I don't know if it's relevant and actually connectable to the average person who is connected to an area. Those people are basically rootless, other than being connected to a military organization, which is, by de facto, a very government-responsive, government-tied organization in and of itself. So I don't see how any of these people, Barack Obama, I look at Ronald Reagan, I see him kind of maybe more of an experience back in that era of our average person, but the bulk of these people were lawyers who are well ensconced, well positioned, went to top-notch schools. I don't see how they're connected to the average person at all. I don't.
Yeah, and look at how they are enriching themselves by going into what they call public service. How do you go into public service and you are enlarging your investments by being in public service? How is that public service and you going in there poor and you're coming out like Pelosi and some of those persons? I think Pelosi is now worth something like, $35 million. And that was on a salary for the longest while of $174,000. And look at how much wealth they accumulate in terms of people coming to Washington with a fistful of money to buy the politicians off so that they would leave them alone. In other words, Tony DeLorenzo is right in terms of his book called Organized Crime, that the government is an organized gangster institution. And I don't take any pleasure in saying that, but that's the truth. That the government is involved in gangsterism. And the minute we began to think that they are going to do that which is the best for the most people, and if they have that as their concern, and you can see it right now, what they're doing with President Trump, is that these people are in pursuit of power. And they don't like the idea that in 2016 that they were discombobulated in the election. And look what happened that was stunning to everybody that was out there, all these pundits that were saying that Donald Trump had no chance and he would be defeated by a landslide, said he's going to get less than 100 electoral votes. You needed 270, and he got 306. And so this idea that this is going to be just going to be a tsunami, political tsunami, they're not paying out. And they have never forgiven Donald Trump for having overturned the apple cart and came up and upset the rulers of the society. And they do not like the idea that the American people went to the polls and did something that was not supposed to have been done because they thought they had us sufficiently brainwashed so that we were not, in fact, act independent of their guiding us in terms of our vote at the poll. But we had an unusual candidate in 2016, and Donald Trump went out there and showed tremendous energy and did a lot of rallies and things of that sort, rallied his base, and that's what turned the tide against an entrenched, political class, of which Hillary Clinton is one of the main persons that's entrenched.
See, these people are going to fight vehemently. You got all these organizations that we always been associated taught that these people are out there for our good. The FBI, the organization now has just been shown it's nothing but it's been corrupt. If you're more of a cynical person, you can look at the rise of this FBI and the prominence in the United States as the premier federal agency, and you can look at the person who ran it for the bulk of the years, J. Edgar Hoover. If you just look at that person right there, it's a tip-off to what that really was about. I mean, this guy was a megalomaniacal individual. He was a control freak. He was a sick individual in many ways for his desire for control over people. And yet we're supposed to have respect for all these people. They're willing accomplices to screw us over, yet we're supposed, because they wear suits and carry badges, we're supposed to have some kind of respect for them. I don't understand that. As a matter of fact, they earn our contempt. We should be contemptuous of everybody who carries a badge at the federal level. Now it's been demonstrated of how politicized they really are.
We have a formula that we used in 2016, and we need to understand that the job is not yet done. We went to the polls in 2016. The Russians did not cause this election. The American people rose up against the rulers, and they went to the polls and they voted their own conscience. They voted their own interests, and they did not vote for the interests of the rulers. And that's why they are upset, because many people broke away from the plantation politics of both parties, both the Democrats and the Republicans, because both parties are involved in plantation politics. And the people came away from the ruling class in both parties and voted for an outsider, and they brought him into power in Washington, and they have not forgiven the voters for that 2 years later. This is now 14 months into an investigation of nonsense. There's no collusion with Russia. I want somebody to tell me, how would you in fact collude in the election in the United States? And how would you in fact have an intrusion into the election of this country, and somebody on the outside is able to influence how we in fact went to the polls on November the 8th, 2016, and we cast our ballot? How did they in fact get in the voting booth with us and had us to, they were guiding our hands apparently, and they were guiding us to vote a certain way in the booth, because we didn't have enough independence of thought to do this on our own. Really, the fact is that we were more independent in this election than we've been in elections in the past. The people went to the polls and rose up against the rulers, and they voted them out of power. And I don't even know how anybody in this country cannot see that we in fact turned the apple cart upside down in this country, and they have not forgiven us for it yet. It is not really just Donald Trump that they are coming out against. They're against the American people. They do not like the idea of the American people going against them, because what that vote indicates is that the American people despise their rulers, and that's just true. That the people in Washington are not respected by the American people. They think that Washington's a swamp. There's a cesspool up there, and they want somebody to go in there and overturn the apple cart in Washington, D.C., and restore government of the people, by the people, for the people, which is what was intended by the framers. And I keep saying this over and over again, that we're going to have to return to the framers. There's no other option available to us. We're going to have to embed ourselves in what the framers wrote, which you probably noticed nobody even talks about the framers. We don't talk about James Madison. We don't talk about Wilson and some of the people that were at the founding convention and what they were trying to do. We don't talk about these foundational points of entry in writing the document, what they were trying to do in that 3-month convention. We don't talk about what they really were trying to do. They were trying to find an answer to government, because throughout history, we had never had an answer to government. We need government, but we need government to be restrained. And how do you, in fact, create government strong enough to do that which is necessary for government to, in fact, have control of the society, where you don't have any persons that are, going out of control and violating the rights of individual citizens. So government is set up to stop the bully, but after you have done that, then you have to also stop government from being the legal arm of the bully. And that is a catch-22, and we have not yet been able to figure out how to do that. We have not yet figured out. We were very close to it, but some things happened along the way. 1913, for example, with the passage of the 16th Amendment and the passage of the 17th Amendment, we were on our way to reining government in and finding a solution to the problem of government going out of control by simply limiting the purse of the government. But in 1913, all of that changed with the passage of the 16th Amendment, when we gave the government access to our pocketbook. And that really was what is where the scale, you tip the scale. You tip the scale at that point, because the government was not supposed to be privy to all of this money, which will allow the government to go out of control, because there's the money to do mischievous things. And that's what the government has been doing ever since 1913. The 16th Amendment was a disaster for this country. And so was the 17th Amendment in terms of the popular election of senators. It was never intended to have a popular election of senators. You were supposed to have the popular election of the members of the House of Representatives. In Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, the House shall be elected by popular vote, and they shall have the sole power of impeachment. But not the Senate. The Senate was supposed to have been the states making their judgment by maintaining their sovereignty, and then being an overseer of the state of the federal government. The states would be the overseer and make sure that the federal government would not go out of control. And that worked up until 1913. But look what's happening now. And what we have now is government of the politicians, government of the elite, by the elite, for the elite. No longer do we have government of the people, which was intended by the framers. And we've got to get back to the framers. The idea that they had at the Constitutional Convention, they put a marvelous document in place. And they were very particular about how they were putting a thematic emphasis in the Constitution so as to limit its power. Even this thing that they're talking right now about Donald Trump, they're talking about impeachment. 222 times last weekend, they kept mentioning impeachment. And impeachment was never intended to be a document. It was never, the Article 2, Section 4 was never intended to be a place in the Constitution as a way of handling impeachment as a frivolous issue, because you are potentially going to overturn an election in this country, and you cannot take that lightly because the people have spoken. But yet they're trying to overturn it, and that's not what the intention was. The intention was to take someone out of power if they in fact are abusing their authority. After they get in power, if they abuse their authority, then you have a remedy to take them out of power. But is that what we see going on here? Is Donald Trump actually abuse his power? And for them to be talking about this man this man is involved in treasonous acts, how does that coincide with Donald Trump talking about making America great, doing contracts with nations so that we don't get the short end of the stick as we've done throughout all these years? How is it that Donald Trump is in fact undermining the country, and that he is in fact doing things that are treasonous? How is that possible when Donald Trump is trying to bring America to a place of greatness and trying to put things in place that benefit this country? And he's doing that.
I would say just not so much. Donald Trump's got so much. We've been screwed over for so long, to put it. It would take a long time and a lot of good presidents to bring us back to that, to being great again. I mean, I'm a cynical person about that. But at least he stops us and stops us from appearing as a schmuck. We've been appearing as a schmuck for 70 years now. We've letting people get the upper hand on us for years. I mean, not that we should abuse of our power, but to give benefit to people basically without looking at any regard to our own interests is absurd. And we've done that time and time again. And it's anybody wants to talk with these social justice warriors, that affects your ability to say they should have, they got to, we would have been better able to if we hadn't been schmucks for so long.
John, you can actually see how generations that were in the past created problems that they passed down to the present, and we have a lot of problems that were passed down to us from at the turn of the 20th century, where Woodrow Wilson really started with Theodore Roosevelt and his progressive movement, and then his fifth cousin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, later on will carry the ends of the socialist state to another level, but it really starts out at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. And we can see that we've been led down a socialist pathway that was not intended by the framers. We've got to get off this path that we're on, because it hasn't worked anywhere and is not going to work in this case. We've got to understand what time it is in this country, and we can lose this. I was telling one of my friends that we need to have a couple of more elections in this country, because the deal is not sealed yet. We've got to have a few more elections where we can not turn back the hands of time, turn back the vestiges of this power grabbing that's going on the part of our politicians. We have to continue to turn them back at the polls. We don't need to have a revolution in this country as far as rising up and overturning systems. We need to understand the power that we have, and we have a lot of power. We can go to the polls and continue what we did in 2016. They are very fearful of the American people continuing what they did in 2016. If they go to the polls in 2018 and they do not embellish the Democratic Party with more power during the midterm election, and that they will have an independent verdict away from the Democratic Party, the Socialist Party, if they can maintain what they did in 2016 and continue down this road where they are going to continue to exercise the ballot to vote primarily against the ruling class of this country. That's what they did in 2016. They voted against the ruling class of this country. If they would go to the polls and do that again, and do that for a couple of more elections, and have the tumbling effect of the voting process, we could do a lot to right this the course that we're on, just through the ballot box. But we've got to continue what we did in 2016. First of all, we got to understand what we did in 2016. We actually shocked the system. That's why they have not yet come to grips with what happened. They know that Russia did not cause this election to be won by Donald Trump. Donald Trump wasn't colluding with Russia. If he was, then where is the collusion? And if he was colluding with Russia, how would that collusion have been carried out so that it would have ended up at the ballot box, so that people are, in fact, going to the polls as zombies, and they are leading us and guiding us at the polls to vote a certain way against our own self-interest? The people were voting for Donald Trump because they figured that Donald Trump was an outsider, and they were very much impressed with what Donald Trump was talking about, make America great again. He was talking about bringing about another type of relationship with the rulers in Washington. Make America great again would be that Americans have to be in control of their own destiny in this country. And they liked the message this man had. And this idea that it was not about Donald Trump running a campaign, there was a much better campaign than Hillary Clinton ran. We have to understand that that's not what happened. Donald Trump ran a tremendous campaign, and it looks like we're looking at a two-term president. They're not going to be able to. I don't even see anybody over there in the Democratic Party that they're able to run against Donald Trump in 2020, and we're just waiting to see what happens in November of this year in terms of how the vote turns out. I hope that it will be another day of reckoning for the power brokers in terms of having another election where the American people speak against the ruling class in this country. Give Donald Trump another verdict at the poll. We need a few more elections, quite frankly, where we can turn the tide against the rulers and continue to do that for a couple of more elections so that the American people take charge of the electoral process and do not entrust it in the hands of those who are the rulers of this country. And that's what they fear. They really fear the American people waking up. And that's why a lot of persons are being banned on Facebook, because they don't want to have the independent voice out there that's actually out here trying to create clarity in the political process. I know that's why I was banned from Facebook. And I'm not looking to get back on there, but I know the reason why I was banned from Facebook was because I was writing away from the rulers, and they didn't like the idea of a black person writing independent of the liberal plantation they have black people on in this country. But that's okay, because a lot of things are happening right now that are coming unglued at the seams. For example, I was noticing over the weekend Jim Brown. Now, can't nobody say Jim Brown is a sellout. That's just not gonna fly. Not when you know Jim Brown's history. And Jim Brown said that he voted for Donald Trump in 2016, going to vote for him again in 2020. And he said that and he said he didn't care. He knows it'll make a lot of people mad. He said he didn't care whether it made him mad or not. He thinks that Donald Trump is a transformative president, and he is that. So a lot of people are now waking up, quote unquote. I don't know if I should say waking up. A lot of people are now coming to a bit of clarity about how to exercise their vote. And you always really want to vote against the rulers, because they don't have our self-interest at heart. The rulers in this country do not have the American people's interests at heart. They are not running in order to serve the greatest good for the greatest minute. That's not what motivates them. What motivates them is power.
There was that guy who was he was a big lib socialist back in the 30s or 40s back in Louisiana, the Kingfish, they call him. Yeah, he was saying about the rich not caring, and they have people to do their hair, women's hair and all that stuff. That's what these people are now. That's what all of our politicians now. They are so disconnected from the average person. They really are.
Huey Long, John.
Huey Long, that's what I thought it was. But
yeah, Huey Long, John. The politicians are like that all over the world. When I was in Gambia, West Africa, a couple of weeks ago, the government was trying to get the bakers to bake bread at $5 $5 is like 16 cents in our currency, and that's a lot in Gambia. And the people that were the bakers were saying that we cannot produce bread at $5 because we would not be able to sustain the operation in producing bread at that price. So the government subsidizes bread with $1 C, and now the bread costs $6 C. I was buying bread every month. I'd go around the corner, and I would buy bread in Gambia for all the children. And I had 40 children the first day, and then went and told all their friends. And I had about 60 children by the time that I left. Bread is very big there. But the point I'm making here is that government, tries to come in and impose its will, regardless as to the financial consequences. They want to impose their will on the producers, and they don't realize that the producers can only produce if they're making a profit. If you don't make a profit, then you have Venezuela, or you have these other socialist states. We don't seem to understand that the capitalist system is based upon the profit motive. You must make a profit to stay in business. If you don't make a profit, then you go the way of the wind. And they convinced the government they cannot produce bread in Gambia at that rate. And so the government backed off. And so in Gambia, although practically everybody in Gambia is hungry, nobody in Gambia is starving. They can get bread in Gambia, and bread is a very basic food source. Bread and bread in the morning, and rice in the evening. And I think they have rice. I don't know a meal that maybe French fries, but I don't know a meal that I had in Gambia that didn't have rice as a base for the meal, and they were really making do with means that were very askance of having a economic system that really is working for them. But wherever government has put its hands on the economy, you have this suffering that you see in Africa and you see in other third world countries. Wherever the government intrudes and the profit motive is in fact suspended, you see the suffering as a result of it, because the profit motive is what motivates people to go out there and produce. And we have got to understand that we're moving in the direction of these socialist countries in this country. And that's not going to work for us because it hasn't worked anywhere else. Okay, well, John McCain, I'm sorry that John McCain passed, but we have to understand that John McCain was just like all the other politicians, and that he was just another one of those persons that was in the way of the real producers, the ones that were doing the production and making the motors of society. That's what John McCain did not understand. The producers are the ones that are the motors of society, and they are the ones that make society work. Okay, want to have you follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.